A horrific tale of neglect, the tragic story of Lacey Fletcher. Have you ever wondered what horrific secrets might be hiding behind the closed doors of neighboring houses? Families that appear perfect at first glance can be immersed in dark depths where terrible stories capable of shocking even the strongest individuals are kept. In 2022, such a tragedy unfolded in the small town of Slaughter, Louisiana. This was a story that outraged not just local residents, but an entire state and shocked the national community. The story of Lacey Fletcher, a girl whose tragic death forced society to contemplate indifference, family relationships, and responsibility towards the closest people. On the night of January 3, 2022, Sheila Fletcher called 911. She reported that her daughter was not breathing. When police and medical personnel arrived at the scene, they were shocked by what they saw. Lacey's body, lying on the couch, had become part of the furniture, her skin so deeply fused with the upholstery after years of immobility. This was more than just a case of incompetence or cruelty, this was a system where indifference had become the norm and suffering had been ignored for years. What medical personnel discovered on site was the greatest shock. According to Coroner Yul Bickham, this was the worst case of his career. Lacey, who had a severe form of autism, was forced to spend most of her life on the couch, and her physical condition indicated that she had probably remained motionless on it for over 10 years. She died slowly and painfully over the last 12 years. Her skin was covered with deep bedsores, and her muscles were almost completely atrophied. Her weight did not exceed 38 kilograms. This was not just a consequence of neglect, this was a cruel isolation that had lasted for decades. Lacey's body lay on the couch, but it wasn't just lying there, it had literally become part of the furniture. Her skin had fused with the upholstery due to years of immobility. She was naked, except for a small blue t-shirt that barely covered her chest. Her eyes were wide open, with a clouded and alienated gaze. Her crossed legs were deeply sunken into the soft couch upholstery, which was covered with a layer of excrement. As a result, the severe ulcers on her body, especially on the lower part, looked as if they had rotted down to the bone. Her face was framed by large red patches. Feces were smeared all over her body, even getting into her hair and ears. Larvae crawled across her entire body, leaving trails, and numerous insect bites only intensified her suffering. In some areas, the skin had disappeared. In other areas of her back and buttocks, the body had become so black that it was difficult to understand that this had recently been a living person. At the same time, the entire house seemed well maintained and perfect, except for this horrific pre-death scene. Nearby stood well-kept furniture, a neat dresser with folded clothes, bottles of lotion, and wet wipes. All of this created a bizarre contrast with the horrific conditions in which Lacey was kept. The smell in the room was so unbearable that some specialists could not perform their duties. Coroner Yul Bickham later admitted that this case was the worst in his entire career. He said that Lacey died very painfully and for a long time. According to the coroner's report, the condition of Lacey's body indicated that she had been in an immobile position on the couch for over 10 years. Her skin was covered with deep bedsores, and her muscles had practically atrophied. Yul Bickham, the coroner, stated, "I have worked with hundreds of cases, but I have never seen anything like this. This was not just indifference. It looked like a slow and systematic deprivation of life." Another crucial aspect was the horrific condition of Lacey's organs due to years of malnutrition. Her weight was only around 38 kilograms. It was like a scene from a horror movie, but this was reality, said one of the jurors who later shared her impressions of what she had seen. One of the most striking facts was that the rest of the Fletcher house looked well maintained. While Lacey lived in terrible conditions, other rooms appeared clean and tidy. Expensive appliances stood in the kitchen, and the living room was decorated with religious symbols. The family's defenders tried to explain the parents' behavior as stress and exhaustion. However, many experts working on the case pointed out that the Fletchers had choices but consciously did not use any opportunity to help their daughter. To understand how this could happen, it's worth looking at the Fletcher family from another perspective. In 1995, this family settled in Slaughter. Sheila and Clay Fletcher were typical middle-class representatives. They were active community members. Sheila even held various positions in the city administration, and Clay worked for a charitable organization. Their daughter, Lacey, was adored by neighbors as a bright, smiling child. In the early years, she was able to socialize and communicate normally with other people. Many teachers spoke of Lacey as an intelligent and diligent girl. A friend of the girl who was friends with her in 9th grade recalled her as a friendly person. However, over time, the situation began to change. Lacey, who had been diagnosed with autism from the beginning, began to face serious problems in her teenage years, particularly with social anxiety. When she was 14, she was transferred to homeschooling due to increased anxiety, and her communication with other people significantly decreased. This was the first signal that something was wrong with the girl. But even then, when Lacey was distancing herself from the world, her parents seemed to pay no attention. Lacey attended a psychologist for 3 years. But because Lacey refused hospitalization, her parents did not insist on it. The parents even considered obtaining a court order to place their daughter in a medical facility. She began to distance herself from her peers and dramatically differ from children her age. Lacey's friend, the neighbor's son Robert Ablates, said, "She became different. She just looked at things differently from many other children. She was different from other children her age. I knew she was an atypical teenager." He also mentioned that Lacey was truly a very intelligent person. But she was not mature like others. She was interested in childish things, not teenage ones. She was already 18 but still watched Disney cartoons. According to neighbors' accounts, even at 20, Lacey could still be seen on the street, but later she completely disappeared from view. Her parents explained this by saying that Lacey simply did not like communicating with people. However, her absence became increasingly obvious. All neighbors considered her just a shy girl who did not like going out in public. Behind the closed doors of the Fletcher house, a terrible tragedy was unfolding. Lacey, given her illness, needed constant help and attention. However, instead of seeking help or support from society, her parents locked her within 4 walls. They never let social workers in, even refusing assistance. "Lacey just doesn't like strangers," Sheila would respond when social services tried to understand how her daughter was doing. "We thought she was just shy," one neighbor confessed. Her parents always said Lacey was fine, that she just didn't like communicating with people. It seemed plausible, and I didn't insist. During the investigation, police found old photographs of Lacey, where she was with friends, at family events. In these images, she looked happy. But the more they searched, the more they discovered pictures where she was clearly emaciated and neglected. This raised new questions. Why did the parents continue to document their daughter's condition but not seek help? Lacey Fletcher, a girl who became a victim of abuse and neglect by her parents, died in 2022, and her story shocked even the harshest critics of social services and law enforcement. Lacey's parents, Sheila and Clay Fletcher, were charged with their child's death due to intentional disregard for her health and refusal to provide medical care. All these events became known only after her death, when the investigation began. But the facts revealed during the investigation provoked incredible outrage. Lacey had a chance to survive if her parents had sought medical help. She was suffering from severe malnutrition and dehydration, which was evident days before her death. Instead, her parents refused to recognize the seriousness of the situation, and ultimately, this cost her life, was found in the court investigation documents. Lacey was found dead in her room, lying on the floor. Her body was exhausted to the limit, without any strength for even elementary movement. Her weight was critically low, almost 50% less than normal. Her skin was pale and wrinkled due to complete dehydration. This moment was shocking for detectives, as they could not believe a child had been left without help for so long. During the investigation, they established that the girl had not visited a doctor for 16 years, last being at a medical appointment at the age of 20. When we found Lacey, her condition was incredibly serious. We could not understand why she was not being fed. She was completely exhausted, her body could no longer withstand such conditions. This was not an accident. This was conscious neglect, was mentioned in the police detective's interrogation. One of the most shocking moments that caused general public outrage was how Lacey's parents reacted to her condition. Clay and Sheila, instead of helping their daughter, ignored her calls for help, even when her body had already begun showing critical signs of exhaustion. They continued to hide the problem from those around them and did not report their child's condition to doctors or social services. During interrogation, Sheila Fletcher stated, "I did not see serious health problems in Lacey. She was just very picky about food. Sometimes children don't want to eat, and we thought it was just her choice." This statement raises even more questions about parental irresponsibility. At a time when Lacey was clearly unable to even move, her parents paid no attention to her pain and suffering. During the interrogation, the parents emphasized that their daughter was conscious and had chosen this lifestyle herself. Lacey was intellectually sound until her final days, so her parents claimed they could not force her to do anything against her will. They said they cared for her as best they could, bringing food to the couch, cleaning up urine and feces, and treating bedsores. However, she never said anything hurt her and did not want to visit doctors, and moreover, did not even want to move. The mother indicated that Lacey was still alive at 10 p.m., although the investigation established that the girl had been dead for more than a day. But the mother insisted otherwise. After the tragedy became known, an investigation began that revealed even more horrifying facts. For a long time, Lacey was completely isolated from the outside world. Social services had no data about her physical condition, as the parents did not visit doctors and even refused visits from social workers. This highlights serious gaps in the child protection system. First, Lacey was cut off from the outside world, having no contact with peers or other people. Second, her mother and father tried to hide her condition from relatives and neighbors, preventing anyone from seeing her. Third, when the police began investigating, it was discovered that the parents had been concealing child abuse for an extended period. Lacey's neighbors, who later became witnesses in court, recalled hearing the girl's screams through the thin walls of the house. However, they did not dare to intervene. One neighbor who testified during the trial said, "I heard her screams and crying, sometimes even loud sobs, but I always thought it was just family problems. We never really know what happens behind closed doors, so I didn't pay attention. Now I regret not helping." After the shocking discovery became public, local residents began to recall strange moments that previously did not seem important. Sarah McGee, Sheila's neighbor, remembered feeling an unpleasant smell coming from the Fletchers' home for many years. "I asked Sheila about it, and she explained they had plumbing issues. It seemed plausible, and I didn't insist," she reported. Local journalists discovered that, despite numerous requests from social services, the Fletcher family refused to let them into their house. This sparked outrage in the community. "If we had only known, we could have helped," the neighbors said. The lawyers for Clay and Sheila Fletcher attempted to explain the parents' behavior as a result of emotional exhaustion and depression. They argued that the couple was trapped in their fears and could not understand the full seriousness of the situation. They loved their daughter but could not break out of this closed circle, the lawyers stated. However, the community was outraged by such arguments, as no one could understand how one could leave a child without medical assistance in such a critical condition. The consequences of this tragedy are still felt today. The local community cannot recover from the shock, as this was a family everyone considered exemplary. After the story became public, a memorial was established in memory of Lacey. It became a symbol of the tragedy caused by indifference and cruelty. The legal proceedings continue, but even after the initial condemnation of Sheila and Clay Fletcher, many people still had numerous questions. How could they have allowed such a situation? Why did society fail to notice for so long that something was wrong with this family? And most importantly, why wasn't more done to help Lacey while she was still alive? Lacey Fletcher's tragedy raised countless ethical and moral questions for society. How could someone be left without proper assistance for so long when it was obvious that their physical condition was critical? To what extent are we responsible for those living near us, even if their lives seem distant and unremarkable to us? Shouldn't we respond to any warning signals, even if they seem insignificant or not our business? One of the key questions was, does society have the right to intervene in people's private lives, especially when it comes to families with children with special needs? Throughout the investigation, many people drew attention to the importance of ensuring a balance between the right to privacy and the necessity of providing assistance in situations where there is a real threat to health or life. How should we react to a tragedy of such magnitude? Selective ignorance or lack of appropriate response regarding families with problematic children can lead to such horrific consequences. At a certain point, this became a question about the overall moral condition of our society. We can all make room for others to help, but this requires a strong will and responsibility that not everyone is prepared to take on. Lacey Fletcher became a symbol of a forgotten victim who was left alone with her own problems due to the indifference of those around her. Her death moved an entire country, as this case became a loud reminder of how important it is to act and the first signs appear that someone among us might be in danger. Sheila and Clay Fletcher were charged with improper care of their daughter, which led to her death. The prosecution emphasized that they not only failed to provide necessary medical assistance but also did not seek professional help. Evidence that Lacey had not moved for years and was in a critical physical condition indicated prolonged and systematic neglect. Sheila and Clay Fletcher were also accused of attempting to conceal the real situation, and even if they did not intend to kill their daughter, their inaction caused her death. The trial was covered in the media and caused a significant public resonance, as the issue of parental responsibility for their children and the duty to protect their health and life became the main topic of discussion. County Judge Catherine Jones made a decision to drop the murder charges against Lacey Fletcher's parents. The primary reason for this was an error in the wording of the indictment, which the defense drew attention to. Subsequently, Clay and Sheila Fletcher were released on bail, with the amount being $300,000 for each. This decision was made shortly before the planned trial scheduled for June 2023. Despite the initial charges being dropped, prosecutor Sam D'Aquila stated his intention to submit the case for reconsideration to another grand jury. Through this, the possibility of holding the Fletchers accountable remains, and they may still receive the punishment they deserve. Despite the entire tragedy, Lacey Fletcher's story became a powerful catalyst for change. In Louisiana, new measures were introduced to prevent similar incidents in the future. Proposed changes to social service laws would provide them with more opportunities to help children at risk of abuse or neglect at an earlier stage. Many people became more attentive to children and individuals with special needs in their communities. A memorial was created in Lacey's honor, where local residents gather each year to commemorate her memory and remind themselves of the importance of being responsible for the lives of those who need help. The local community realized that even if someone appears isolated or inactive, it does not mean they do not require support. They learn to be more empathetic, to pay attention to people around them, especially when the first signs appear that they might be in a difficult situation. Lacey Fletcher's story is a tragic lesson for all of us. It is a reminder of how important it is to act when we see that something irreparable is happening to someone close to us or our neighbors. We have no right to remain indifferent to others' suffering. Sometimes, even the smallest step we take to help another person can save a life. Lacey could not escape the horror unfolding in her life, but her story became a call for all of us not to allow similar tragedies to repeat themselves. Society must learn to be attentive and compassionate toward those who cannot independently seek help. Ultimately, we all bear responsibility for one another, and it is our duty to ensure safety, support, and respect for every individual. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Until next time, friends.